weekend? Let me know in the comments below. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back. It is a beautiful Friday. Took Friday off to spend time with you guys working in the garage. This is Jason with JWClassicVW. If you're new to the channel, thank you for joining in. We are getting back to work on this 40 horsepower build. Trying to get the long block done today. Working on some pistons, cylinders, and let me turn you around and show you what's going on. All right, well here she is, all covered up to keep her from getting dirty, nasty. Zoom it out a little bit for you. Dun, dun, dun. All right. First off, if you're new to this video series, check out up here to get caught up on where we at. We went ahead and built out the short block. Everything is good to go with the crank and new bearings and got the case sealed up. The oil pump kind of just chilling out because, you know, we got some other things to do before we pack this full of some Vaseline. We're gonna go ahead and first install the sump cover and the filter strainer on here, and then go ahead and put on our oil cooler. Ooh, let's flip this around so I can show you guys what I'm talking about with that. The oil cooler up here. And you have to have certain kind of seals and gaskets to make that happen. So that's what we got going on today, guys. We're gonna go ahead and try to get the long block assembled. Because after the long block, we got some carburation, some tins, and then fire this baby up. I'm looking forward to that. I know you guys are excited too. So right after this intro, we're getting into that content, guys. So see you in a second. So I got one of those universal kits for engine rebuilds, and there's all kinds of stuff in there that you need and that you don't need. And what we're gonna do first is go ahead and take care of installing our oil cooler. But on the 40 horsepower build, you use the seals like this. There's other seals also, but you're not gonna be using those. Where are those at? These seals. When you're looking at these seals, these are for the oil cooler that you would be using with a doghouse shroud type of oil cooler that offsets and sits back a little bit farther, but we're not doing that with the 40 horse. We're using the stock oil cooler because that's fine for what we're trying to do. Don't need this either because it's got those dual port gaskets in there. We're gonna be running with the single port gaskets, which I'm not sure if it's the big ones or the small ones. We'll take a look at that here in a moment. But here's our strainer. That'll be going on right now with some gaskets and some copper little seals for the hardware, and then put our plate on. Oh, let's sit you over here. Okay, so like I was telling you guys, easiest way to check is how do they fit. Ooh, nice and snug. That's perfect. That's how you know you got the right ones. And what it does when you put the oil cooler on here, it crushes these down into place. And the little bit of lube that we put on helps create that sealing surface that you want to have on there. So yeah, here we go. And this is just some white lithium grease. You can use regular oil too, that's fine. Or nothing. Some people dry fit these, which, you know, I put it like this so it helps with the crush. So when they get crushed down, they kind of move in a more sealing kind of way, I guess. We all have our own little tricks that we do, guys. Some people might put aviation sealer on these or something, but I've never done that. Just a little bit of lube and no leaks ever. Now, why am I putting the oil cooler on now? I'm sure some of you are kind of wondering that, oh, is this the best time to do that? It is, because access to these little studs right here become a little bit more difficult whenever you've got the pistons on, and the pistons are going on next. Well, after the oil sump cover. Yes. And you can see that even if with the pistons not installed yet, this is a little bit difficult. And these are 10 millimeter little nuts on here, guys. And I've got one in my hardware box for the other side over there. I gotta go find that. All right. Yeah, this one looks like this. Just the regular old 10 millimeter stud. I take this one down a little ways, and then I'll go to the other side and start tightening them down. What you want to do is just evenly tighten these down. You don't want to take one side down too much than the other, because that's when things start to get wonky. This side you can take down a pretty good ways. Now we'll move over here to these two and bring them down evenly together to crush this down, crush it. Now, sure, you could use a wrench here, or just like me, a really long extension, but you're definitely not doing this if you have installed your pistons already. See, a little on one side, and a little bit the other side. So when you lube up the seals, it kind of prevents any pinching from really happening. If you put these in dry, that might be a problem you could run into, and it could ruin the seal. So that's why I put a little bit of lube on there. But you do what you want to do. This is what I do. Let's flip it around. All right. It's time to install the strainer and the sump cover. Now, when you're buying these, make sure you pay attention because these strainers come in two different flavors. One for your 1600 and one for your smaller 40 horsepower engine, like the 1200, 1199 cc, something along those lines. But they're different. Probably a single relief case. You know, single relief case, only have one oil relief on the front. Has a different oil system. This pickup tube is actually smaller than on a 1600. So you gotta pay attention to this. And here's something that I found, which was kind of crappy. I ordered the right strainer, but the strainer fits loose on here. So what you do is you can see like the cuts on this one. This is actually like a German strainer. The cuts, there's more cuts in there. So it fits differently. And this one has only like 3. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull these out a little bit to get this to fit tight the way that I want it to. So depending on who you talk to, certain individuals will put sealer on here. I don't. I just use a little bit of oil. I oil up my gaskets before I put them on. Some people just put them on dry too. But I do oil them up so it makes it easier to remove them, you know, when you're doing oil changes or having to clean up the strainer or whatever. So a little bit of oil on the gaskets. And let's get this thing on here. You know, some people just put the copper gaskets on here. I always use a little bit of my Cure LT on here as well to help seal things up. So show you guys what I mean. Just a little bit around the stud location. Oh, look, it's coming out of here. Dang it. I have a crack on the side of this thing. You know, it helps get it out faster, right? A little bit more. Good. Also, in the kit comes a new copper gasket for your oil plug here, so we'll replace that as well. This one right here. It's a crush type gasket, so you definitely want to make sure you replace that. Let's clean off some of this extra crap. And then we'll put the oil relief in here. All right, we got that on here. See, it's a crush type. That's like 24 foot-pounds. Or it's supposed to be like 24 foot-pounds, but we will not be putting 24 foot-pounds on there. We're just gonna do it by hand. Same way with this, I'm gonna go around real quick, just don't over tighten it. Good. 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 Good to go. Yeah, that bad boy's 21 mil. "24 foot-pounds. All right, guys. So we got the piston here for the relief valve. Take a look and see a little closer. Huh? You want to make sure you clean this up pretty good with a wire brush before you stick it back down in there, because it'll get stuck if you don't. I'm going to put some assembly lube on this and then put it all together. And the piston goes down. This part is up, piston down. So dirty. So the first thing I gotta do is clean these bad boys up, but let's take everything apart and get it kind of organized first. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back. It is the next day. We took a little break, and now it's time for you to take a break. Don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe off to the side, guys, if you're enjoying this content, which I know you are. And look behind me. We got some math to do. So if you guys are afraid of some mathematical equations, then scary times are coming. We're about to talk about some ring gap. Let me go ahead and turn you around and show you what we got going on. Wait, it's turning me around, not okay. Here we go, guys. This is what we're talking about. This is the general guidance when it comes to ring gap. And I kind of broke this down in different categories based off the kind of stuff I figured you guys would want to know on ring gap. Now, the information where I pulled this from is from the book, the big book off to the side on naturally aspirated street information. Let me show you which book I'm talking about. This is the guide I like to use. How to hot rod your Volkswagen engines. Good stuff, guys. Look in the description below if you are interested in getting your own copy. But if you look through here, and it talks about fitting rings and about the gap, we're going to be talking about per inch in size of your actual cylinder. So if you take your cylinder and it's a millimeter cylinder, which most of these bad boys are, I don't think I've ever ran across one that doesn't show you in millimeters what we're looking at. Let me see if I can zoom you guys in on this particular piston. 8545. Okay, and that millimeters is going to be the first number you need when it comes to doing this mathematical equation. Let's go back over to the board and I can show you what I'm talking about. So we go ahead and take that number, that 85.45 millimeters, and you got to convert that to inches, which works out to be 3.364 inches. And I just used the Google search option on my phone, guys, to figure that out. So then we take that number, multiply it by the ring gap that you need per inch, and come up with 0.15138, which works out to be 16 thou. So we're looking for a gap of 16 thou for 85.45 pistons and cylinders. And you can see here that that is the top side of the gap for either first, the top ring, or the second ring. All right, now these gaps kind of differ depending on who you talk to. I also have up here what you would look for ring gap when it comes to NOS or turbo engines, 200 horsepower or less with 15 pounds of boost or less. NOS or turbo applications, 200 plus horsepower or 15 pounds of boost or more. So you can see that what happens is your gap gets bigger because the pressure in the cylinders increases, of course, right? So you want to have a little bit more gap there to help let those gases get by without blowing things up. And that's exactly what would happen is if your gap is too small, you're going to blow some crap up. So let's go over to the bench and talk about what we do to inspect this piston ring gap. What we want to do is you want to have the bottom of your piston set up, and I've already got a ring in there that I've checked for gap. And you just can use your piston itself because you got all the rings off. This has all been cleaned up nice. And you want to go about 2 inches down, which works out to be, with these AA pistons, right where the wrist pin is at its the top point of the wrist pin hole. So right there is 2 inches. You can go ahead and just mark your piston if you want to with a ruler to figure out what that 2 inches is, but you want about 2 inches down inside of your piston. Then what you do is you look at your gap. Let me bring you guys in a little bit. You look at your gap, and we're wanting 16 thou, which I already checked this. We're nowhere near that. It's actually at 22 thou, which is closer to, if we're talking about the Blue Book. The Blue Book reference, which is between 16 and 22 thou, we're right there for that top ring, the oil ring, which is actually supposed to be the larger gapped ring between the two, because your oil ring or the top compression ring is supposed to be at a larger gap than the second ring. So now we're going to go ahead and check the second ring. It's real simple, just squeeze it together. And the same thing we're looking for here, guys, is we're just go ahead and take our piston and push it down. Push that ring on down 2 inches. Let's see what kind of gap we're working with on that one. These pistons are from AA, and I'm not sure how they ship them. I've actually never checked the gap on these. Shame on me. Looks like they're both at about 22. Let's go ahead and see if we can get a larger one in there. Get that 22 in there. Can we get a 23 in there? Let's find out. Whew, 23 fits. Oh my goodness. So what's going to happen is I'll probably end up swapping these rings around, because they're the same exact rings pretty much. 24. You want to see if 24 fits in there? Let's check it out. So we can't add material back to these rings. 24 fits. Holy crap and a half. Fits really tight, but it fits. We can't add material back to the rings. So if you're in a situation where you've got rings that are just like horribly overgapped, which this isn't bad. This is not to where I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So what we're going to do is we'll just run with these rings. I'm good with these for what we're building. But if you're building a high horsepower engine and these gaps in the specific spacing that you have on these gaps really becomes a crucial part of how the engine is operating, then you're going to probably want to get a new set of rings if you can't gap them correctly. Adding gap, no problem. Adding material back to the rings, not going to happen. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and run through all of these pistons and cylinders, check all the gaps on the rings, and I'll be back in a second. I'm going to time-lapse this so you don't have to watch me do it for like an hour. Be back in 1 minute. We'll go over the results. Cool? All right. guys, here's our gaps overall, and they are all over the frickin' place when it comes to ring gap. But they're not so far out to where I'm like super scared. What I'm going to do is my gaps that were the larger you saw I was marking those blue, those are going to become my top rings, and then the smaller gaps will become my second rings. For the oil slicker rings, they were super gapped. I have no idea. It was huge, probably like 40 thousandths or some crazy stuff. So that's well beyond the minimum of 0.0015, which I guess not really, because they weren't too small of gaps, so that's good. But there you go, guys. Final look at the gaps. Now we're going to talk about ring spacing and clocking, where you should have your rings clocked to. The most important thing, you know, I think there's some misconceptions about how you should be clocking your rings. And the fact is, whenever the piston is working, doing its job inside the cylinder, those rings are moving, they're floating around, they're supposed to move. So the most important thing is to have them staggered. So the way that I stagger mine are just offset. I put my oil rings, the 2 oil rings, lined up with the bottom sides of the wrist pin, so like right here, and then right here. And then I go ahead and do my 2 compression rings just up at the top, off each other. So like a 2 o'clock and then like a 10 o'clock at the top. Always start at the top. It helps out with break-in of the piston and cylinders. You don't want to have it towards the bottom because that's where oil collects. Eventually your rings will rotate around and they could end up in the bottom position if you ever tear these things apart. But for break-in purposes, that first 20 minutes or so, you want to go ahead and have them staggered towards the top. The oil slicker rings being down here, like off to the sides, not a big deal. I'll go ahead and put that on the board real quick so you guys have a visual of what I'm talking about. All right. There you go, guys. Here's a real quick visual of what I was talking about. There's the top of your piston, bottom of your piston. Compression ring 1 off to the 2 o'clock position. Compression ring 2 off to the 10 o'clock position. And then your oil slickers stagger on either side. All right, guys, now let's talk some specifics about the rings, because I know that there's going to be some questions about the rings. And how do I tell which way is the top and the bottom? And you know, there's a couple different ways when you're looking at these to be able to identify on the ring. Now, if you're looking at the ring, let me see if I can get you guys closer towards the bottom over here. Maybe that'll help out. Okay, all right. All zoomed up now. Now, you guys can see these little dots. And sometimes it's written top second, or top ring. And these dots are the same thing, but you can also see that there's a bevel. There's a bevel on the inside of this ring here. That bevel will always face up, guys. I don't know if you can see that or not. But there's a bevel in there, and there's a bevel in this ring too. These rings are exactly the same. The only difference that I found with the rings when I was going through these is that the gap was a little different. So based off of the information that we have and what we know about AA rings in particular, we want to have the larger gap towards the top, smaller gap on the second ring position. So we'll be swapping some of these around to fulfill that need, but that's your top, a little dot. Also, it can be written on there. When it comes to the slicker ring, this one right here, these should not be overlapping ever, like this. They just touch each other, just butt up against each other. Cool. It's time to put some pistons together, guys. And you've seen this before. I don't use a special tool whenever I put my rings on. I just hold them like this, and then I open them up and put them up over the top of the piston. Really fast. And then a compression tool to compress the rings, drop them down inside of here. I do use a little bit of oil inside my cylinders themselves. I'll put a little bit of oil inside here. I do not oil the ring gaps, though, or the ring packs. If you had this thing and was sitting around for a while, if you knew this engine wasn't going to be started up for a few months, you might want to go ahead and use a little bit of marbles on here to go ahead and use for break-in. But the majority of people out there, and there's 2 rules of thought here, guys, or 2 different schools of thought here. Those that will oil the ring pack and those that do not. They leave it kind of dry. Well, I don't do either of those. I just oil up the inside of the cylinder wall itself with Marvel's mystery oil, because Marvel's is a little bit thinner than, say, regular oil, and I think that helps out with break-in. What you decide to do is up to you, but I'm going to go ahead and build out my pistons and cylinders now, and I'll be back in a flash, guys. Well, guys, that is probably gonna do it for today. I know I wanted to get the long block done, but a lot of stuff covered when it comes to pistons. And this is a video that, well, I guess we're just dedicated to building out those pistons and some of the things you gotta look for when it comes to ring gap and then orientation for how you gotta clock your rings. Also, if you're watching the time lapse on that video on how I was putting everything together, I was making sure that my cylinders were in the orientation that they would be going into the case. And that will also come into effect with the little arrow that's on your piston facing the flywheel. So that's why I was putting things the way they were and kind of moving them so that everything was in a line up right when I go to put the pistons into the case, heads on, push rod tubes, long block, and then we've got next episode. Next video is going to be getting the cylinder heads ready to go, and then probably building out those solid rocker shafts, guys. Once again, thank you to all of you, all of my subscribers. You guys are awesome. We're going to be at 4,000 before you know it, and it's all because of you guys out there. Don't forget to check out the Facebook group, my Instagram, description below, guys. If you're ever wondering what's going on with Jason and JWClassicVW whenever we're not putting out videos, join those two groups, and you can find out on social media. Thanks, guys. Hope you guys are enjoying your weekend, having a great day. Maybe I'll get this video out Saturday. See you guys next time. This is Jason from JWClassicVW, and I'm out.